Welcome to DeKalb Talks Tourism, our podcast show, and we are very excited today to have a brand new company in town in our Chamblee area, and I would like to introduce Indra, who's going to tell us all about Switchyards. Welcome, Indra.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about yourself to get us started, and how did you come about to having the position of head of growth for?
Sure. So, I'm about 26 years old. I'm from a small town in northwest Georgia, up in Polk County. If anyone knows where that is, I don't think many people do. Growing up, there's probably like 5,000-6,000 people in my town. So I spent pretty much my entire life there, up until college. So once I went to college, I went to Georgia Tech, where I studied business and had a minor in engineering while I was there at Tech. And during my time at Tech, or at least towards the tail end of my time at Tech, I started a company called Sora Schools. Sora is a sort of new kind of school, like an accredited online sort of project-based, non-traditional kind of school, like no tests, like projects, that type of school, where we basically just gave students a lot more agency in kind of what they wanted to study and things like that. So I started working on that end of my college career.
Not to ask what age group or what, is it college-based? Is it high school-based?
It started out initially high school, then expanded middle school. So at the end of my time there, it was 6 through 12. So I worked on it for about 5 years, with my two co-founders that I met at Tech, Garrett and Wesley. And there we just, we kind of eventually found our own roles, within the company. Garrett was our CEO, Wesley was our COO, and I was our chief growth officer. So we worked on it for about 5 years, grew the school, started it, had to start it first, grew the school to, 150 kids, raised probably in our total time, probably just a little over $20 million in venture,
Wow.
just to really build what we called the future of school. And so I stepped away from the company at sort of the top of the new year. So about end of January. Where I just wanted to pursue other opportunities. The company was at a right stage. We had found some generally good talent on the marketing and growth side and mission side to kind of lead the charge. And I stepped away for a bit, took a little bit of time off. But then I randomly ran into Michael at Switchyards. And then I shortly thereafter joined the company as head of growth.
Well, I know we're here about Switchyards, but before we leave, the other one, is the school based here? Is it online only? Is it?
It's a virtual school, so based everywhere. We do have a lot of students, in Georgia, because that's where we got our start. So
right.
We have the most students in Georgia, in terms of our state distribution. The next largest state would be Texas or something, or Florida.
Very interesting. Now on to Switchyards. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Switchyards is an interesting story. So before I ran into Michael, say a couple months ago, I was actually a member of Switchyards. So Switchyards started in 2016, originally with its downtown location over on Ted Turner. And originally it was it kind of took a couple sort of evolutions to get to its current stage. But originally it was started as this sort of business to consumer sort of startup hub, incubator / office space, that type of concept in the downtown location. They had weekly programming events, things like that to attract companies made in Atlanta, the consumer show, just these sorts of things to get people working on consumer sort of products and businesses, to just kind of form a small locus in Atlanta, just because Atlanta is such a business to business kind of town. You
right.
have a lot of large companies serving other companies, startups, starting up to serve large companies, and you don't see as many consumer brands launching out of here. So Switchyards originally kind of started with that thesis, but as Switchyards sort of grew, and as Michael thought about it, the real thing that Switchyards eventually was building itself towards was this sort of new way of work, which I'll sort of get into, later into our conversation. But they made the switch. I don't even think they were quite using the term at the time, to now what they're calling the neighborhood work club model. But they made the switch about 2019 They opened up another location in 2019 just to sort of have this sort of multi sort of location based type business where you had this sort of club that you could subscribe to, become a member of. Like at the time it was like $50 a month. They were just kind of testing with the pricing, and you could just sign up and work out of there. So no like consumer, you didn't have to have a consumer, you didn't even have to have a business, you didn't have to be a entrepreneur or founder type. You could just be, I don't know, working at Coca-Cola or be some, freelance designer or real estate agent, whatever it was. And you could just work out of the space, just go in whenever you wanted. Now, of course, at that time, it wasn't the 24/7. They hadn't made it that far yet. It wasn't a 24/7 location. But over time, like they kind of made small tweaks and changes. They changed up like the type of like spaces that they operated in. They used to be in bigger spaces. Now they're a bit smaller, but more like densely populated kind of spaces. So they kind of made tweaks and changes over time, but eventually it morphed into what we're now calling like the neighborhood work club model. And so and we call ourselves kind of like the country's first neighborhood work club model, because as you kind of mentioned earlier, like this isn't exactly a, thing that most people are familiar with. I mean, you don't like exactly know how it works. I'm happy to talk about it. And so the neighborhood work club model, or at least this kind of product that we build at Switchyards, really, I think it's really building on this concept that like where people work nowadays is just so different than where we were doing even like 3-5 years ago. Even 3 years ago is different. 5-10 years ago is still pretty different, but even 3 years ago is different, especially in the wake of like COVID and the lockdowns and pandemic and just post-pandemic, like what people are doing for work, nowadays. Like, you have people that still go into the office and still go to, just work full time, like in person. Then of course you have like the crowd that works remote, just doing like across, international borders, but even just, domestically too. You have people that work remote that have, that work, the company's based in Boston, but I live in Atlanta and I just work as like a software engineer or something like that. But then you also have the crowd that just work this sort of like hybrid like model where, I'll go in the office once or twice a week or something like that. But still, that whole cohort of hybrid and remote is such a large cohort nowadays. Like, and so these people generally need a place to work. Now, of course, most people, like, they work from home. Like, I used to work from home before I joined Switchyards. And the problem with working from home is that, people are generally made to be around other people and to, have to generally be work around other people. Like, it's just part of our just DNA. Like, sitting, I mean, I remember, like, I knew I needed to make a change back in the day when I was about to join Switchyards my first time as a member back in 2019. I knew it was a problem because I was sitting in my house working remotely, and I realized, I don't think I've left my studio in about 2 days.
Right.
Because I was, eating from, I had dinner and everything, and, I wasn't seeing any friends, but I was just like, I haven't left my apartment. And I was like, I should really get out of the house. Like, I need to go somewhere else. And, you have people that do this thing where they work at coffee shops and things like that. So I used to do that. I had like I called it like a little circuit. I, just bounce around different coffee shops throughout the week. And I also tried out some co-working spaces as well. Like I used to, work out at WeWork and things like that. But the two problems with those solutions is for the coffee shop, coffee shops aren't really designed for what most people would do for work. Like they're coffee shops. They're made to have coffee, like sit there for like half an hour or something like that, read a book, chat with some friends, and then you go. But nowadays you walk into, any coffee shop with a large amount of seating, you see a ton of people there just on their laptops working. And it's really a substitute product, because I can tell you my experience with working at a coffee shops was, it's loud. Like a lot of times, like it gets kind of messy too. You're brushing aside like crumbs and, the spills and stuff on your desk constantly. You order coffee, then if you're working there for a few hours, you feel kind of guilty that, hey, I've been here for a while, I should probably order something else,
Places like that, I've even heard where the coffee's free, but you have to pay for the internet.
Oh, really? I haven't even heard.
Yeah, I've heard a few places like that because you're there for the internet.
Yeah.
And you, like you said, you order one cup of coffee, and then you'll stay for hours. Where if you have to pay for internet every hour, you're getting your free coffee, but you pay for the internet.
Well, and that's the problem they're addressing is you have these people that just park there for like 5 hours and just work on their laptops. And then, like I said, I did the WeWork thing too, but frankly speaking, it's kind of expensive. a lot of the times. And also WeWork, I don't know if you've ever been like in a WeWork recently.
I've never been in a WeWork. I always thought it was interesting, but
no, so visually it's a cool space. You know, it's got like the modern designs. You know, you got the oak wood type furniture and tables. And
I've seen the social media, and they do look really cool.
Yeah, they look nice. The problem is though is that a lot of the ones, especially the ones I would work out of, like most of the times. So we work from a business model perspective, but of course this informs the product, is really built around just offices. Like their business is offices. They make the most margin on offices. They sell like that's their main product is offices. So that everything they do is selling to companies that want to have their people work out of their, those glass cube type offices. And the problem is that like in a lot of spaces that tends to form this kind of, let's just call it square roughly. I mean, it's a rectangle or whatever, but let's just call it square, like a ring of offices basically around like each floor, right?
Right.
So you have most people working out of these cubes. And then, of course, you have these hallways that kind of get people to those, like to their offices. And you have the central area, which is where like people like me, like the hot desk people would work out of. But the problem is all the energy is contained usually within the offices. You have some people that go in, in the middle to like sit on the couch sometimes or, get coffee or, rinse their mugs and things like that, but for the most part the energy is just very much distributed like away from the center. And so as a sort of member of just WeWork, but not like an office member, because I'm not going to pay for an office if I'm working remotely. That's just so expensive. Like it just feels like despite being in a large building with a lot of people, it feels vaguely empty and not really like in a space that's kind of designed for you. Like it's like I'm one of the few people doing this here, and everyone else is just in an office. So it doesn't also just feel good as well. But like the thing about Switchyards is that everyone like is a just general member. Like there's no office.
I was going to say, so you can't actually rent a space or have a private office. It's all open.
Yeah. So most of the spaces will range, let's call it between 2,500 to 4K like square feet. Like there might be some variations across locations, but that's like roughly where a lot of them will sit. And so in these locations, it's effectively, in a lot of them, especially the types of spaces that we get, they're effectively one large room. Now, of course, we do, very neat things to design the space in a way that it doesn't just feel like you're in just one large room. Like, we'll put up these walls with like filing cabinets and things like that and use the phone booths to kind of design the space in a way that feels like it has rooms. But effectively, they're just one large space. There's no like office, blocks or spaces or things like that people can rent. You just join as a member. And so with Switchyards, what really makes it different, and the reason why I joined as a member is because as a space, like first of all, if you've ever walked in one, it just has a lot of it's not a very scientific way to describe this, but it just feels like it has more personality and character. Like, you'll see like the what we call like our newsstands, which are kind of chosen from a cadre of like local magazines and newspapers and things like that. Like we source a lot of like the furniture and then plants. We have a ton of plants and a ton of lamps. There's an internal running joke that each location we open has more lamps than the previous one. I think our Chambly one will have over 100 lamps easy.
Oh wow!
Just across the space.
That's good for me because I need a lot of light to read.
Oh, there's a ton of light, in a designed kind of way. Like, there's something like that feels like vaguely alive about the space that just feels like you're not sitting in like a soulless kind of empty office. Like it just feels nice is the only way to put it, and kind of inviting. And so there's different use cases around the space too. Like the space isn't just all like, for example, couches. That would be not very productive kind of space. Like there's a few sort of different distinct experiences within the Switchyards locations themselves, usually two. There's like a cafe area, which you will usually have some couches. You'll have, of course, the coffee machine and, the cream, etc. Like all the little things around like the mini kitchen area that will have like all of that stuff. And you have, of course, the more like open style seating where you have like the little circle tables and, two chairs like across from them. And then like usually separated, I'll say usually, not always, usually separated by a mixture of filing cabinets, plants, and these like phone booths that you can rent for, say, like Zoom calls and, meetings and things like that. There will be what we call sort of like a library. We call it like library of deep work and focus, where you basically get, it's, I guess, kind of library rules. You don't really talk as much in those spaces, and that's where you kind of really just sit there and like drilling on your work. They're kind of like made up of these longer, I guess, library style tables with like the lamps in the middle. So the spaces are usually kind of separated along those lines. So there's also kind of different ways you can use the space as well. Some people, like me, I just work out of the couch, and especially when I'm meeting people, I'm in the cafe area. But sometimes, when I have a lot of things to do and not enough time to do it, I'll be in the library and just drilling down.
So with that, do you have an area, like say you're working and you need to print out things, or like you're a student and you need to print out articles? Does it have access to printers and copiers and all that stuff like an office would, or is it more just you kind of bring your computer in and you print stuff at home later?
Yeah, that's pretty much the latter, is you just kind of bring it. Like Switchyards, there are a lot of things that we could do, like, and honestly people have probably asked for like over time in the past. But Switchyards, like in many ways, like we want to design it for a very specific kind of use case, is like this space where, like, let's just take for me, let's just use me as an example as like a previous member. So I joined Switchyards in 2018. I worked out of the house probably like a few times a week. Most of the time I was in the house, but I went into the locations usually for like a few hours at a time, a couple times a week, and I just worked out of there. Like Switchyards has like a policy of having no food. Obviously we have our own coffee, but there's no, like, you can't like bring in your sandwich or something like that, or you can't like buy some Chipotle and bring it like and eat out of the space, generally to keep it like cleanly and to keep it for one use case. It's there really just to kind of get out of the house, or get away from the endless distractions of the office and things like that, and you just go in and do some good work for a few hours. It's not really meant for you to just kind of like stay there constantly like an office.
So is it actually the non-library room, is it set up to where you could have, I don't want to call it a meeting, but lack of a better word, sit around and talk about things with other people that are purposely put together, or is it that's kind of frowned upon?
No, yeah, that's the non-library is generally a bit chattier, louder. Like that's usually where people like one of the another like use case that people have used for Switchyards, especially because like as a member you get access to all of the locations around the city.
I wanted to ask
also
that.
have people that go, like, say if they're in a certain part of town for a meeting or like for me, for example, I'm probably like the Chambly location opens tomorrow, but for example right now I'm probably like 12 minutes away from the Chambly location. Like I'm probably going to stop by there like after this and work on some things for like a couple hours. So you have people that kind of bounce around like the location sometimes, even intentionally for like meetings that they'll have. Like if they know they're going to be in a certain part of the city, it's like, oh, like instead of saying, oh, let's meet at, the coffee shop or whatever, it's like, oh, let's go meet at the Switchyards. Like I'm a member.
So how does that work? Because you're really starting to intrigue me now, because I know I bounce around
A lot of people
a lot of different places. I mean, we have an office here. Obviously, I have an office at my house.
Yep.
Theoretically, I use an office downtown at Georgia State. I'm all over the place. So it's got me interested in, so you pay one fee, and you can go to all these different facilities. Now, how does it work? Say you did want to have a meeting. Say I am at the one that's in Georgia State, and I wanted to meet with
one
someone.
downtown.
So I'm a member. I can go. How does that other person get in?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just having a meeting with one person, you can just let them in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. I think that there's a lot of
we
uses
generally
for that.
discourage if you're bringing in like a party.
Right.
But if you're just meeting like a person.
So that's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
So how many locations are in, say, Metro Atlanta?
So right now, all of our locations are ITP. Technically, even the Chambly one is ITP, right? It's 285. So right now, we with Chambly opening tomorrow, we'll have 7. But we're also opening one in Adair Park as well, like just kind of a little southwest of the downtown like area. So we'll have 8 at the end of the month.
Very cool. So basically with that, so you seem like you have a great growth already planned. So with your position in head of growth, that means for the whole company. So expanding, is your plans to expand out of Metro, like meaning just around Georgia? Are you getting into Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, or what? Do you all have plans for that yet?
So we do have plans to grow outside of Atlanta and even outside like the state. We haven't selected where we're going to go yet for the next market quite yet, but we are actively thinking about it. Like, we're going to continue to expand. And
So are you,
Metroland, of course.
I guess, thinking about that, because if you're going corporate-wise, yeah, definitely we're the hub. If you're going to, say, expand into university towns, that gets you a whole different market with Columbus State or down in Savannah or even Dahlonega. But, I mean, so you got different concepts, I guess, you could look at expanding into.
Yeah. I think right now, like, in the spirit of sort of focus, which I think is a really, like, strong, like, sort of driving theme of the company, like, we, want to build something for a very specific sort of type of use case, within, specific type of, like, neighborhoods and towns and things like that. And, like, I think at some point, of course, we're going to, be across the country and, hundreds, thousands of locations, etc. And then we'll be kind of for a lot of different use cases, a lot of different types of people. But right now, at least, I think that, like, opening another, like, say, like, metro area is probably in our future, is, out of state. Can't really say where exactly that'll be yet.
Right.
So I think in the, say, coming months, as people sort of, continue to go to sign up to be members of Switchyards in Atlanta, of course, we're going to continue expanding in Atlanta. Like, one of the things that we discovered pretty early on, this is right before me, actually, before I joined, was that, like, originally they had this hypothesis that these Switchyards locations, these, sort of clubs, could only exist, say, like a handful in a given area, sort of like a Costco or something like that, where it's like, oh, there's going to be a few in this sort of general, like, metro area, like 5 big ones. Like, everyone goes to the one in the downtown, then one in the north, and one in the east, and one in the, like, things like that. And then they started opening these sort of, like, locations a lot closer to each other. And they realized that, oh, wait, hold on, like, you can open these up really close to each other, and they still attract a lot of sort of new members, like, locally as well. Because one of the things that people really like about Switchyards is the convenience of just being able to go to one. Like, right now, for example, I am almost equidistant from Buckhead and Chambly. Like, I could go to any of them if I really want to. They're about the same drive for me. Like, maybe some days I'm feeling the Buckhead one, and then some days I might want to do the Chambly one. So they quickly realized that, oh, we can have more than just 5. Like, in Atlanta, we could have, like, a couple dozen, like, locations in the Metro Atlanta area alone. Like, some locations we might even open, like, a mile down the road, for example, and that still works.
So how does it work? Like, say, downtown, the one in downtown, does it have parking?
Yeah, so all the locations have parking.
Have parking provided.
Yeah. So some of them I will say some of the locations have better parking than others. It just kind of depends on the area you're in. Like, for example, like, downtown tends to be street parking or, like, the nearby parking garage, where Chambly is just kind of, like, it's on a smaller road. Like, you can just park, like, on the pretty, like, small, like, I don't want to say deserted, but kind of, empty street. There's, generally, like, a lot of free parking there. Like, Buckhead has, like, a whole parking deck, like, right in front of the location that has plenty of, like, parking. So, yeah, it's, like, generally not too, some of the locations I'll say are a little harder than others on the parking side, but almost all of them have, like, a generally dedicated lot or area that most Switchyard members go to.
So you say Chambly is opening up tomorrow.
Yep.
So tell us, how did you choose Chambly? And is Chambly going to be different? Is it going to be a new style besides more lights, obviously?
Yeah, we always want to increase the number of lamps. Eventually, we'll hit a critical mass. But so we chose the locations that we're launching in, and we're going to announce a couple new ones probably in a couple weeks as well. Like, at least announce, like, that they're opening, not like we're not going to launch them, like, in 2 weeks. So we mostly chose these locations because actually in the fall we ran this what we called Battle Royale campaign. We said, hey, like, if we had to open up 5 new locations, like, after we've opened our I think at the time, what was their newest one? I think their newest one was, I think it might have been Buckhead. I'm not entirely sure. So they were just trying to figure out, hey, where do we want to go next? And so they ran this campaign. It's like, hey, which neighborhood should we be in next? Vote for it, and vote with your feet, and let us know where we should be. So it had, like, a huge outpouring of responses. Now the company, I'll tell you, like, it's at least at that time it was. Still right now too. It's pretty small. It was like 6 people. Like it's like full time. Like it's not exactly like a huge like team of people or resources or anything like that. Like this is not a company that's raised like $20 million or anything like that. It's just relatively small like operation, all things considered, despite having like thousands of members. So the campaign, like they didn't have like many marketing dollars. It's like not like they just drove a bunch of ads, threw up billboards and anything like that. But you just had a ton of people, and this is I think a real story of Switchyards. Like you just had a ton of word of mouth like growth like in the company. Like the Battle Royale campaign, I don't remember exactly how long it ran, but I think it ran, I want to say at least, of course, a month, maybe a couple months. And I think it had over like 3,000 responses or something like that. Like
Wow.
you just had people telling their friends like, hey, let's all rally, behind our neighborhood, like come, to Adair Park, area or whatever. And, everyone put in your email, sign the form or whatever. And so that helped them choose. All right, fine. So we clearly know that around this Chamblee Brookhaven area, we should have something. Okay, around this Adair Park, West End, Westview area, we should have something. Oh, Virginia Highland, like that whole area. Yep, we should have something. Oh, it sounds like Inman Park area. There should be something. So, you just had people just kind of choose and vote like, hey, like we should open up a location here. And we're like, all right, fine. So the people have spoken. We'll be here. So the Chamblee location, as far as design, like we always push ourselves with each location, not just on number of lamps, but really just want each one to be sort of our next level like of work. Like we don't want to just like we're not at a stage where we're just stamping out like the exact same ones.
Right.
There's some level of like standardization. Like we're going to use similar types of couches and the types of phone booths we are going to be from the same company, and there's some level of standardization, but I think each space also has some level of like personality drawn from like the local area. I used to joke, now since I joined the company, I found out this was only half true. I used to joke that Switchyards, the locations, about 70% of it would be kind of Switchyards fare, kind of standards, like, oh, this is what the plants are going to look like and things like that. And then 30% that you just find in like antique stores and things like that. It's like, oh, like where did this sign or this little piece of art come from? Okay, it's like that's not standard looking, but I think, and again, that speaks to the whole like
gives it personality. It's not the same, not cookie cutter.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's the baseline experience is still similar, but every space feels a little different. I mean, you can kind of tell. Like, of course, it depends on the building as well. Like a lot of the buildings, even the types of spaces we choose, and that's another big difference that from like say like a standard co-working space. So let's put in like perspective. So like a co-working space like a WeWork or a Industrious or something like that, like they're gonna open in mostly like kind of office city center type areas, right?
Right.
They're gonna open in just imagine where one would be. Like you're not gonna imagine one like in the middle of nowhere. You're just gonna imagine it. Like okay, it's probably gonna be around Perimeter Mall, for example, if you're opening up in Dunwoody, or it's gonna be like near Pot City Market. Like it's gonna be open in these kind of like core areas. But frankly speaking, that's not where most people live. You don't live in a
right.
Unless you're in one of those like really expensive luxury apartments. Most people live in neighborhoods, like just small, kind of like with small like side streets and things like that. And Switchyards, we typically open these locations, like we call ourselves a neighborhood work club. We typically open them almost in neighborhood. Like if you see some of these locations, they're like really close by. So in some cases next to a house that's just, because the types of locations we choose are sort of, buildings have have a bit more character. Like the one in Adair Park, for example, we're opening in an old like historic like schoolhouse that's had like decades and decades of history. Like we're opening up the Chamblee one in this kind of like converted warehouse.
Where is that location in Chamblee?
It's on a 3436 Miller Drive. So it's right off Peachtree Boulevard. So next to a whole spate of new apartments, like and across from like this Volvo dealership.
Okay.
It's just really close. It's really close by off like the main road. Like if you came off 285, it's probably like, a 5-10 minute drive, right off the exit. 10 in bad traffic and 5 in regular traffic.
Very cool. I was wondering if it was downtownish or
it's decently close by, but not like inconveniently so. It's kind of tucked away into this little side street like Miller Drive, like right off Peachtree Boulevard. Of course, is a very busy street, but Miller Drive is just very quiet. You have a good amount of apartments, around that area as well. Then you have a lot of like local hotspot restaurants and stuff that people can go to afterwards, like after work and things like that, like a Hopsticks or you know, Blue Top or something like that.
Okay, I think because I'm not familiar with Miller Drive, but when you're saying Hopsticks and all that, I think I have a pretty good idea where that is.
Yeah.
So, do you have any type of events or programming you're going to do at this new Chamblee location?
We might do say something like one or two like random one-off events, but like Switchyards doesn't really do many events. I'll say, especially on an ongoing basis. It's just not. I mean, you probably know this. It's just a different business. Like you're drawing crowds, you're getting speakers, and getting big names, and putting on like attractions and your entertainment basically. Like we're almost focused entirely on just the utility of what's a space that people can work out of that makes them feel good and is a productive space that people can use. Like there's eventually like in the future there'll be other things that we can sort of layer on to the space. Like there's a whole layer of community things that we could do, like events and having like an online community and happy hours and things like that we don't really do right now that we could do in the future. But in the spirit of focus, like just do one good thing and do it very, very well first before moving on.
So we've talked about your amenities. Is there? I mean, so you have the coffee and you have the couches and sitting area, the library function. We talked about the membership. Is there other type of amenities that's offered that maybe we haven't discussed yet that's unique to the Switchyards?
So every location will usually have, let's call it 3 to 4 phone booths that are bookable. So you can just use these for like calls and Zoom meetings and things like that. You can just go on like a little website link that we have, like switchyards.com/rooms, and just book them ahead of time. And they sometimes get pretty competitive to book. We also have, in some of the locations, especially the new ones, we'll have a conference room that you can book for like a meeting. But it's just one conference room that you can book for the meeting, and it'll have like the little screen there and like table, whiteboard, things like that. And then, oddly enough, I'll say at some locations, again, this is the variance between locations. For example, at the Buckhead location, because it's in an office park, like, well, not quite an office park, like it's not that big, but it's in kind of this building with like a central courtyard. That in of itself is an amenity. Yeah. And you can walk around there, especially go outside for lunch and things like that. I think there's even like a ping pong table there. Like in the outdoor area. So some locations will have more quote unquote amenities than others, just by nature of where they are.
Well, with the way today's Zoom and WebEx meetings and all that, those little telephone booth type things are so important, because I've been on so many different meetings where they're like, they don't have the time, obviously, because they're running, they don't have anywhere to go, and you've got all this background noise, and it's hard to hear them, hard to hear us. So I think that's pretty ingenious that you have that you can, if you're a member, you can pop around in different parts of Metro and be able to handle these Zoom meetings or whatever. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Had to get that cough out, especially before I'd started talking. But basically, like, we think that nowadays, like, the type of work, the style and the way people work just needs a lot more flexibility. Like, not that we demand flexibility, it's just that people already work in a flexible way. And so you need this sort of like new spaces, the physical environments in which we work also has to be flexible and adaptable to that. Like, just having like, a single office building, and again, different strokes for different folks, it works for some people, but for most people, I think most people want something a lot more flexible, where whether it's multi-location or someplace they can go in at different times of the day, like, versus like maybe you're a evening work type person, or you're a morning person, or, whatever. Like, you just need something that kind of works for you. And like most spaces, I don't think really accommodate that. But in one way, like, I think Switchyards is sort of naturally built for this whole trend of like a more flexible style of work. Exactly what you touched on is like, oh, sometimes I might be doing this or doing this, So.
Oh, yeah, I think it's a great concept. So before we end, I guess there's two things. One, do you have anything that we haven't discussed that you want to bring up? And then two, if you got a great story to close us out.
This is a fun question. Let's see. Well, first, before I, quickly answer, like, is there anything that you're more personally curious about that I haven't talked about yet? Just before I say anything.
Well, I guess the only thing that really comes to mind, and then maybe not get into the history of the company, but just any type of inkling to the name Switchyards. I mean, I'm sitting there going, okay, because you can switch around, because it's different and unique, something to dealing with the train history. I mean, I'm like all over the place when I think Switchyards.
Yeah. Then now we're getting into a topic where I'm not as good at, because I wasn't there initially when they picked the name. If I remember the story off the top of my head, I think a member suggested it. Like, actually, in the running, they could have been like, I think it could have been. It was like it could have been like the Beltline something company or whatever. Because originally they were considering opening up pretty close to it. So I know that was like in the running. But Switchyards, I think a member. I mean, they're already kind of leaning towards it, but I think a member suggested like that name.
Well, it does have so many different connotations. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
and it's definitely unique and different. So
yeah, I think like, I think the only thing I'll say is that like, for Switchyards, like, the that I'll say that I think in some ways, like, I think people will appreciate is that Switchyards, at least when I joined the team, like from the outside perspective, like as a member, it's like, oh, it's a cool space or whatever. They got a bunch of lamps. Here's some good plants. They have good coffee. But then you join the company and the team. Like, I think one of the things I've been continually impressed by is like the dedication to like the level of detail of like quality that they drive in the company. Everything from member communications and emails to like how fresh the cream is to the appropriate lighting to the temperature to the the sound of the speaker, the music, the type of songs they put on the playlist for each location. Like, it's just like such a fascinating like level of like I call it almost Disney level like amount of attention to detail they have on like just the experience, which I think makes me feel pretty great. Being at the company that like they're gonna care a lot about like the product that they're not putting out something that's like because you have not to be snarky about other people's businesses, but you do have a lot of like these types of businesses that'll just put out something because they're like, oh, like a co-working space, for example, like, oh, I own a building and we got some space on the 5th floor. Let me just throw up a co-working space, put up some desks,
right.
Get some IKEA furniture and, put up some glass walls and we're good to go. We'll sell it for a couple $100 a month or, $1,000 in a bigger space. And it's like, yeah, but there's no level of like thought put into like the product or, how each thing is used. It's just like, you're just kind of doing something to do it. But everything like at Switchyards like has a reason behind it, which in my opinion, like makes it just, will continually make it like a superior product that like people will want to use because they're actually, they actually care it, and they actually in some cases are building it for themselves, like their own use case. So they're gonna make it good.
So currently, membership is how much a month?
So membership is $100 a month. New members will get the first 2 weeks free, just so you can
try it
out. In fact, I mean, you could probably try it out. We got the new Chambly location. It's like I haven't driven from here to there before, but it's probably not that far away.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage
you. You got to go tomorrow. Had a meeting yesterday in Chambly. Got a meeting at the City Hall Thursday. So
yeah, so come check it out on Thursday. Like it opens on Wednesday, but by Thursday, like it'll still be. I'll say like the first days of the location are always a little busier than others, so it might be a little harder to get a seat. But I mean, at the very least, you just stop by and check it out.
Need to do that.
The locations, so new members, like I said, will get the first 2 weeks free, and then it's $100 a month after that.
Well, we were figuring it out, so it came to $3.33 a day for unlimited coffee.
Yes,
that's what gets my attention.
Yeah, people drink, and we spend a good amount on coffee. So it's one of the kind of things that we just care a lot about and put a lot of effort in. It's like the coffee and how, like I said, how fresh the cream is and things like that. So yeah, people come to Switchyards for just, of course, a place, but internet, coffee, and lamps.
I was gonna say, you've got my attention to be able to read, have the internet to be able to access, have the lights that I can actually read, and coffee. So you got three most important things in the world to be able to go to a place.
Yeah. And, it's like I said, because of the way we designed the space, like, it's got some areas that you can meet people in and be a little louder, but it's also got those quiet areas that if you just need to focus, you don't want to, hear like the super, loud, background noise of a coffee shop or things like that. It's also nice for that as well.
Well, I'm anxious. I'm going to check out the new Chambly location.
Yeah.
So, Indra, I'm very excited to you coming to our show. We appreciate it. And I guess as you start expanding huge, we have to have you back and talk about all the other new locations you're going to have.
Oh, no. We get a lot of people that ask about like a Tucker location. Like there's constant demand we get. It's just a matter of, choosing, which place we want to take on next.
Well, with us sitting here in the Tucker Northlake area, that would be nice.
Yeah, no, we've gotten, people will tag us on social media like, hey, I see a picture of this warehouse, like be here or something like that. And we're like, we'll keep it in mind. Sometimes the location just kind of depends on like what's available, frankly speaking, in the market. Like just,
so you don't do like a book thing where you can bring a book and take a book?
No, not quite.
Yeah. I think that would get people, because then you can go find other books to read and just fill up your own book and put it back in there. Everybody's probably on Kindles now.
I know. Well, I think I still do the physical books. I do like electronic books if it's like a book that's gonna be very convenient to read that I want to like. If it's like work related, like it's a marketing book, then I might have that. But if I'm reading like I don't know, some fiction book or something, I'll just get
the real book.
I like them. There's something to the physical nature of it. It's like Switchyards. There's something to the in-person, like physical, like real world stuff that I think we still need to hold on to.
Very true. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out today and sharing with everyone about Switchyards. And now, before we end, real quickly, if people are interested, how do we find you?
So they go to switchyards.com and check us out. We're opening in Adair Park next Friday, so by then we'll have 8 locations across the city. So Buckhead, Westside, Cabbagetown, kind of all over ITP.
Well, Indra, thank you so much for coming.